This video will start you down the road of Chapter 17's financial statement analysis. The whole chapter is about looking at a company and its financial statements in entirety and trying to decide, how's the company doing? How is the company doing compared to how it was a few years ago? How's it doing compared to its competitors? Does it look viable? Do you think it's going to be able to keep going year after year? There's lots of things we want to look at with a company. But to this point, we've learned how to create the financial statements, how to record entries, but never stepped back and said, now that we've got all this information in financial statements, in reports, what is it telling us about the company? So this chapter is really going to do a switch and say, let's sum it all up and figure out how the company's doing. There are three big areas we're going to look at: horizontal, vertical, and ratio analysis. Horizontal is looking at the company itself over time, taking a particular item off the financial statements and watching how it tracks over time. For example, how were sales last year? How are they this year? Are they getting better, more, larger amount of sales this year than last year? Or are they trending downward? You can do that with any item on the financial statement. You could say, how much were our liabilities 3 years ago? How were they 2 years ago? 1 year ago? How are they today? If we keep getting larger and larger and larger amounts of debt, that may not be a good thing. So horizontal is looking across time. Vertical is trying to take the items on the financial statements and turn them into percentages. It doesn't make a lot of sense till we get into it, but for example, in the past, maybe I had 5% of my assets I kept in cash. So cash was always 5% of all my assets. And this year, I'm keeping 10% of my assets in cash. And I can look at my competitors and say, okay, they're bigger than I am, so they have much more assets than my company does. But I can turn it into percentages and say, well, what percentage of their assets do they keep in cash? Oh, about the same amount we do. Okay, I'm in line with my competitors. But if I didn't look at it as a percentage, I would just say, well, they have a lot of cash and we don't have much. Because we're different size companies, it makes it hard to compare unless we turn things into percentages. So I'm going to walk you through some vertical analysis. It's not hard, tedious math calculations, but if you're good at Excel, you can speed up the process a little. And then ratio analysis is taking key items off the financial statements and looking at their relationship to each other. For example, total current assets and total current liabilities and how they're comparing. Current assets divided by current liabilities is something called the current ratio. We like to see a lot of assets and not too many liabilities. So we'd like the current ratio to be large. And we can see, calculate the ratio, see what it is, see if it seems reasonable, see what our competitors have for their ratio between their current assets and their current liabilities. We can also look at how our company's been over time. What was its current ratio 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and so on. So I probably am going to take time to do separate videos for each of these three. That way you can hone in on one, have a quick video, practice homework problems related to it, and then move on to the next type. But overall, most students find this chapter relatively easy, just tedious with all the number crunching. So let's start with horizontal analysis. Remember, we're comparing over time. There's a couple ways we can do it. We can just do last year and this year. So 2 years put side by side. What's the trend? How is it changing? Did it get better from last year than this year or worse? So I grabbed exercise 17.4. I grabbed the data out of it, but what we're doing is not what the problem asked the student to do. I just liked it because they gave us a last year and a this year amount. It happens to be an income statement they gave us. We could do this exact same thing for a balance sheet. But what I need is 2 years of data side by side. So I just grabbed it because it had great data for what we needed. Sales last year and this year. And you can see sales went up. You can also see that cost of goods sold went up. Profits went down. Expenses went down. That's good. But net income went down as well. And that helps us some when we can visually see that. We can even do the calculation. How much did it go up by? Well, that's a subtraction problem. So all I have to do is come over here and do the math. It was 625, it went up to 740. When I subtract the two, I get 115. I can do the same thing for each one of these, just subtract them and find out the amount of the change. Some positively changed and some didn't positively change. It just mean positive or negative. I don't mean good or bad, because cost of goods sold is a positive change. It increased. That's not good news, though. It's not like I was thrilled about it going up so much. I love the fact that our expenses dropped, but they're shown as a negative number because it's a decrease. The next thing we want to do is percentage of change. And that you want to do the amount of the change divided by the old year. Always want to divide by the older year. So in this case, I would say the amount of the change divided by the old year. And that works out to be 18.4%. So sales went up by 18.4% from last year to this year. And we know that cost of goods sold jumped a lot. So when I do that same calculation for cost of goods sold, it almost doubled. It went up by 92%. Let's fill in the rest of these. These decreased. Gross profit dropped by 46%. Operating expenses dropped by 41%. Profits dropped by 55%. Again, going up or going down isn't necessarily good or bad. We have to look at what it is. Love it that my expenses dropped. That's good news. Profits dropping, that's bad news. So take a look at those, and then we're going to look at trend percentages, which are quite similar, but we're looking at multiple years. Trend percentages cover multiple years. So in this example, I grabbed problem 17, 2B, the balance sheet, and you can see there's multiple years of data. So I can't just say, what's the change between 20 and 21 and put it in there and calculate the percentages. I can do it, and then I'd have to do it again for 19 to 20. So there's an easier way to do it. What I've done is create a second spreadsheet down here, same company, same accounts, but here I'm going to put percentages instead of dollar amounts. The way you start out with trend percentages is you pick the oldest year and you say that's 100%. Then you figure out how much 2020 is in comparison to 19 as a percentage, not how much it changed by. Like it didn't jump by 20% or 25%, but this is maybe 120% of the prior year's number. So let's go up and look at the data. Current assets went from 36 to 32. They actually dropped. So 32 is only maybe 80%, maybe 90%. I'm doing the math in my head of the base year, 2019. So I'm going to take the new year that I want to calculate divided by the base year. So 32 divided by 36 and put it here as a percentage. And that's 90% exactly. Then as I look to 2021, it really jumped. I'm only going to look at the base year and 2021. And I'm going to do the division 2021, the year I'm looking at, divided by the base year and turn that into a percentage. So we can see that we started in 2019 and set the bar at 100%. We dropped in 2021, but then really rebounded in 2021. It's 50% higher than it had been, 51% higher than it had been in 2021, and 61 percentage points up from what it was in 2020. We'll do the same thing. You can see the massive drop. Long-term investments, we had some in 2019, really reduced how many we had by 2020, and we don't have any in 2021. Plant assets steadily went up. Well, they went up in 2020, then they dropped just a little. So we're going to see at least 100% here, 100 and some percent. And it's still going to be 100 and some percent because it's still higher than the base, but it would be a little lower than 2020. So let's fill those guys in. So again, each of these is computed by taking the amount for this year divided by the amount for the base year. And that would work whether it was a balance sheet or an income statement. You would still do the exact same things. You would set the base year, every item at 100%. And then you take the dollar amounts of the item for the next year. So for example, current liabilities, 19,000 divided by 16.5, the base year amount, and that gave us 116%. Then current liabilities jumped even more, so they're 136% of the base amount. So hopefully that helps with horizontal analysis. The next video, we're going to talk about horizontal. Going to get this right. That takes care of horizontal analysis. In our next video, we'll look at vertical analysis.